Javier, I will open with you. Many of today's jobs did not even exist a decade ago, while others have been fundamentally transformed. How should governments interpret these job transformations when shaping labor market policies for the next generation of jobs?
Thank you. Thank you.
And hold your mic very close to your mouth.
Thank you, Terence, and good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to just start by saying thank you to the organizers, in particular Her Excellency Mr. Lal, for the invitation. We are really, really humbled to be here. So what I would say is, and maybe I think my co-panelists are going to be in agreement, I think, is that we need a change in paradigm. And the paradigm change is to stop thinking about jobs as the occupations, and rather move from this world of certification-based approaches and systems towards a world where is task-oriented, task-based oriented, where you have skills sort of clusters, where people can acquire different certifications that are not necessarily big degrees, but rather micro-credentials. You know, some of them can be acquired in community colleges, also by private providers, and they shouldn't take more than, 40 hours to acquire, so that people can transition from occupations that were sort of more standardized to occupations where they need more flexibility. Take, for instance, the project managers. A project manager in construction, let's say. So that person, if it needs to transition into, let's say, healthcare, because societies are aging, and that would be perhaps an occupation that requires more supply, so workers need to take their skill set and move into that newer occupation. So we know that many of the occupations or the jobs that exist now can utilize around 70% of the skills that are related to the tasks that the new job will have. So for instance, let's say an oil controller, an oil and gas controller that exists here in the UAE, that person can transition into a green economy or green job by moving into chemical controller of different kinds. Could be fertilizers, could be anything. And the monitoring that that person does is similar. The content might be different, but the processes are similar. So using the skills that are already in place seems to me the most cost-efficient way of transitioning.
Right.
So the skill set needs to be based on the tasks rather than on the occupations.
Right, which is consistent with, I think, what some of the conclusions of the last session, which is focused on the talent and transferable skill sets as opposed to jobs per se. Carl, you've done a lot of work around, research around the future of work. We've just heard a couple of policy pronouncements around how government should approach this. What's the one thing that governments get wrong when they try to rethink how reworking skill sets for labor should be developed?
Well, I think you pointed to it in your earlier remarks, because you were essentially saying that the only thing that we do know about the future is that we're pretty bad at predicting it. And so let me just take a moment first to acknowledge how hard this is, right? So to predict the labor market over the long run, you need to have an understanding of the innovations and the technologies on the horizon. But even more than that, you need to understand the pace of adoption. So 15 years ago, people thought that autonomous vehicles were on the horizon. And they were probably still there today, right? And so in most places, we haven't seen widespread adoption, although it's gradually happening in a few cities. So if you would have inferred 15 years ago that truck drivers, taxi drivers, bus drivers are likely to disappear, you may be right, and you may still be proven right, but it may have taken you 20 years for that. to happen, right? And so timing is everything, and timing depends on many factors beyond the technology itself, including rules and regulations. So you need to be able to experiment with autonomous cars for them to be adopted in the first instance. And it depends on consumer preferences, which are hard to predict as well. That said, some guesses are better than others. And I think we do have some understanding, sort of conceptually, about what the boundaries between human capabilities and AI capabilities are right now, for example, right? And so AI thrives in environments where there is a lot of precedent, right? Where there's an abundance of data. But it doesn't do necessarily very well when it encounters new and novel situations. So most people in this room will have heard of AlphaGo beating the world champion at Go back in 2016.
Yeah.
Fewer have probably heard that human amateurs using standard computers beat the best Go programs by exposing them to positions that they had not encountered in training 2 years ago. And so even when AI has achieved superhuman performance, we still don't know how well these systems perform when new circumstances arise.
Right.
And shocks happen all the time. So if your job is very prone to change day to day, you're probably relatively safe from automation. Second point, and then I'll stop. Back in 2013, we did a study where we tried to outline these bottlenecks to automation. And back then we said that complex social interactions is one of the things where AI is very unlikely to outperform human workers. We now do have actually chatbots that perform as well as human workers in many virtual settings. But still, I think that only increases the value of in-person communication. Right. Because if AI writes your letters and everybody else's, how do you distinguish yourself in such a world? Well, the only way to do that is through in-person communications, yep, where humans still excel. And so by looking at these various factors and bottlenecks to automation, we can say something about where humans are still likely to hold the comparative advantage, yep, for the foreseeable future. And that, I think, can inform labor policy.
By the way, whenever I host conferences in New York and throughout the U.S., and I'll invite people to speak, and afterwards I send them handwritten letters of thank you. Short, but I still write them out by hand. It's unbelievable the response you get when you send, in 2026, when you send someone a handwritten letter. The people are like, I can't believe it. It came, delivered by a courier on horse. No, it makes a strong impact. Ruba, I am curious. It feels like historically we've had this sort of capital and labor sort of, dialogue around protection of jobs. And yet, as we're talking about transforming jobs for the future, what is the ILO's sort of view on the concept of workforce readiness in this sort of new paradigm? Because it doesn't feel like it's rote job protection like we used to do.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm really happy to participate in the World Government Summit again this year. And happy to have this distinguished audience. It's also difficult to speak after the Director General of the ILO, so the risk of repeating what he says, and not a good idea to disagree with his point of view. Actually, the first time, honestly, we looked at the important issue of the workforce readiness. Like a few years ago, His Excellency, actually, the Minister of Human Resources and Emiratization, when Your Excellency mentioned the ChatGPT, for me, back then, it wasn't launched, but you mentioned the advancements in digitalization and technology, and it wasn't even there yet. and mentioned the importance of being ready now. That was, years ago. And that the workforce needs to be ready for this. And I think the combination of the human resources with also the Ministry of Education is the perfect match. So it is, important to have the workforce educated to be able for that to transform. Now, from the ILO's perspective, I think the workforce readiness is the compass that the governments should use and need when labor markets are constantly shifting in a very fast shifting environment. Jobs appear, disappear, they transform, and it is also difficult for the government policies to catch up with this. Shaima mentioned earlier the skills gap, and I would add the challenge of the jobs gap, which is projected by the ILO to be more than 408 million in 2026. This indicates that those people cannot access decent jobs. So again, it is, if we focus, as also Javier has mentioned, that if we focus on protecting occupations or on focusing on occupation, we risk defending the map of yesterday and contributing to the problem. So it is, from our perspective, it is the shift, the workforce readiness, it is the shift to focus on people, the transferable skills, the lifelong learning, the system that supports transitions, and also most important is the social protection. Yep. So in a nutshell, we should be protecting people, not positions.
I like that. So Javier, we've talked a lot about skills and about focusing on talent and people, and it sounds great in theory. But let's talk about how it's manifested in practice. I mean, are you seeing this actually happen? I guess it's in real time because it's all happening right now. I mean, because this is all nice, but it's just happy talk if it's just theory, right? Are you seeing it manifest? And if there are any challenges or slowdowns, what's inhibiting sort of its manifestation?
Thank you. I think I'm going to use what I learned from you, which is I don't know.
Yeah.
No. Well, of course I don't know. But what I've seen actually, for instance, in our work with the EU on green jobs and the green transition and how to better prepare for those occupations, we see that the European Union, like the US, for instance, they have developed the taxonomies, which determine what sort of skills are used for the tasks that are needed in every occupation. So they map all of the occupations in these countries, and they go to the task level and identify these clusters of skills. And I think this is very valuable. So governments should invest in the infrastructure for the future, which is the taxonomies, right? Setting the rules so that skills are portable. So right now, in the past, if I was a lawyer or an economist, like in my case, so you do that, and it's difficult to move away to another job without actually a lot of friction. So in the future, because everything is going to be so agile now, everything is going to flow so quickly, or is actually flowing so quickly, we need systems government systems that create the infrastructure for portability of skills, that enable those micro-certifications and that verify who is actually providing those skills. But the skills that are needed are actually in the private sector, the private sector is the right stakeholder that should determine those skills. So we have seen it. I saw my friend from Singapore that leads the Skills Future. Mm-hmm. They have done probably, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I think I don't know if you agree, is probably the institution that has done the most progress in all of these fronts. Of course, there's still work to be done. The EU is a little bit behind, then Australia, I think. So there is There are things happening, but we need more, and probably we need more when it's not happening as well. So in countries that are middle and lower income countries where this investment is not being made.
So that brings me to Carl. Sometimes, as Javier made mention, there's a gap. There's a timing gap in how fast government can sort of reconfigure with the speed of how the private sector or the speed of how innovation is developing. I guess it varies, right? We just heard Singapore is on the leading edge. Certainly sounds like the UAE is on the leading edge, and maybe Estonia. I mean, we're handpicking different locales across the globe, but I would say, ask the question as, overall, do you think the timing gap is getting longer or shorter? How are governments managing this?
So what's really puzzling to me is that if you look at what's happening with uptake of new technology, like AI, it's accelerating.
Yep.
If you're looking at patent data and innovation, it's accelerating. If you're looking at business dynamism in the US, in Europe, in China, it's down. If you're looking at job transitions, it's down. If you're looking at productivity, it's flatlining, right? And so yes, there is an extraordinary mismatch between the technological capabilities that are being developed and our capacity to harness them. And so it seems to me that our institutions, and that's not just labor market institutions, but institutions in general, are not very well equipped to deal with these technological developments. And so one domain that a lot of people are particularly excited about in AI is its potential to boost medical discovery. And I think there are good reasons to believe it will. But then you still need to go through clinical trials, which is a burdensome, lengthy, tremendously expensive process. I think AI has a lot of potential in transforming education. I happen to work at an educational institution. It's hard work, it's slow, it's tricky to get a consensus on many things. And yes, so I do think there is a mismatch, but I'm not sure if the mismatch comes from the technological change being more rapid than in the past. So the 20th century saw some extraordinary transformations around the automobile and electricity as well.
Yeah.
I think what is declining more is our capacity of our institutions to adapt to these changes, with some exceptions, as you mentioned.
You know, it almost feels like it's a bit of jump a ball, right? In the sense that what used to be a specific job, we don't have these sort of hard categories of jobs like we used to. It's a little bit more fluid. Like personally, I'm an investment banker and a comedian. Go ahead and try and characterize that. Why don't you? So I guess if we're redefining sort of jobs, my question, Ruba, to you is, does the ILO see a need to develop new international frameworks to address undefined professions? Because I think transferable skill sets just breeds an environment where people are going to be sort of multifaceted and it's hard to categorize them. Or can existing standards be adopted to essentially what is a new reality in an AI world? And does it? And I guess, and then the follow-on is, and does it matter? Does it matter that we have specific categorizations and standards, or can it just simply be fluid?
Actually, no. It is essential. It remains, the international classifications remain essential tools for policy design. However, it is, like you said, it is increasingly strained by the new occupations and the emerging occupations. New roles, particularly in the AI and in green economy, they evolve too quickly for these international occupation classifications to classify them. I don't see this as a failure in the classification systems, but they need to become more dynamic, and they need to be more frequent in updating.
So more dynamic. I think that's actually the theme of this conversation is agility and dynamism. Everybody, the three words, say it all with me. I don't know. Thank you very much.